Hi everyone. Today we are trying something different. I've always been a big fan of arcade beat 'em ups, and today I thought we'd play two of my favorite beat 'em ups. So I actually happen to own both of them in their original PCB version. So I have Final Fight here and Konami's Crime Fighters 2, or Vendetta as it was called in the West. So I'll do a playthrough through both of them, and to play these I will be using a super gun. This super gun, which I'm using, is very simple. I bought it off AliExpress a couple of years ago. So this one, it supports component, RGB SCART, as well as S-Video. Today I'll be using S-Video. It also supports controller ports for DB15, so you can hook up any Neo Geo controller for this. But it also has support for Saturn controllers. So if you have a Saturn gamepad or Saturn arcade stick, you can hook up your Sega Virtual Stick for it if you like. So I'll hook it up and we will power Final Fight on. I'll just turn down the volume. Yeah, so this is Final Fight, Capcom's Final Fight, released back in 1989. Some of you are probably aware of that. Final Fight was originally planned to be the next Street Fighter game. So it was planned to be the follow-up to 1987's Street Fighter. But Capcom, they changed their mind and instead developed Final Fight as a standalone beat 'em up, which I believe was a really wise choice. There are multiple home ports of Final Fight. And this specific area is quite interesting because you see the blinking LED lights in the ceiling. It turns dark here and then they turn on again. This is one particular area where many of the home ports don't actually include in the home ports. So I believe not even the Mega CD version or the Sharp X68000 version have these blinking ceiling lights in this area. I mean, so Final Fight was released in arcades in 1989 and it was a smash hit, and we had like two follow-ups on the Super Nintendo. Unfortunately, we didn't have any arcade sequel, but it's always been one of my favorite games ever. I mean, ever since I was a kid, when I first saw this in the arcades, I was blown away. The action, the huge sprites. It's such a cool game. I mean, it's a classic brawler. I was never a big fan of Double Dragon or those games, but Final Fight, I mean, from the get-go, it was a favorite of mine. So the fact that you can play two-player together made it even cooler. So I've always wanted to own the arcade PCB, so a couple of years ago I bought it off, I think I ordered it from a guy in Netherlands, and yeah. Final Fight was also, as I mentioned, ported over to a lot of home consoles. Probably one of the most famous ones is the one for Super Nintendo or Super Famicom. That one was both censored and downgraded heavily from the arcade port. For instance, that one was one player only, which was yeah, and Roxy, Poison, and I believe her name is Poison. She was censored in the home ports, at least for Super Nintendo. The developers, Capcom, they thought of her as a transgender, but that was too heavy for the guys over at Nintendo, so it was removed from that version. So I'm playing here on my JVC monitor, and this is S-Video. I think it looks really good. The reason I'm playing this in S-Video is because I still haven't bought the clone card, the RGB clone card for this monitor. He also had a turbo controller which allowed you to hit really fast. So yeah, back then in the late 80s and early 90s, there were very few beat 'em ups. I mean, you had Double Dragon, which was very popular, at least in the States. And you had Crime Fighters in the arcades, Konami's Crime Fighters. But apart from that, there were very few games like this. So when Final Fight was released, it was so much better than anything in the genre. I mean, it looked ways better than Double Dragon. I've never been a fan of Double Dragon, but if you compare this to Double Dragon today, I mean, you can just imagine how far superior this was in the arcades back then. And there's one thing which Final Fight have, which always impressed me and still does even until today, more than almost 35 years later, is the impact in your punches and kicks. I mean, when you kick or punch someone, it really feels like there's an impact. I mean, Final Fight also has some nods to the pop culture of its time. For instance, you have these guys, the Andor guys, which is obviously a nod to the wrestler Andor the Giant. You have the enemies called Axel, which is a nod to Guns N' Roses singer Axl Rose. You have Slash, another enemy called Slash. You see the bartender is reading his magazine while his bar is getting smashed down. So I'm playing this on a Neo Geo arcade stick. It works really nice, because you don't have that many buttons to control in this game. You have like a punch button and a jump button. I believe that the Super Nintendo sequels didn't get that good reviews back in the days, if I recall it correctly. Yeah, another thing about the original Final Fight on Super Nintendo. Remember I mentioned that Capcom did a sloppy job converting that to the Super Nintendo. Not only did they remove the two-player option, they also removed Guy. So you had only Cody and Hagar as playable characters. Okay, we are in the lift area. You can't have a beat 'em up game without a lift area. Okay, so we have Rolento, the boss here, the stage boss. He's a badass guy. I mean, he throws these grenades. That's a fun detail. He actually commits suicide in the end. He throws grenades at himself. On now they're just throwing everything at you. I mean, how many enemies do you have here on screen at the same time? You have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, time for the final boss, Bulger. It's so funny, he's sitting there in his wheelchair with Cody's girlfriend. What's up with that? I trashed his wheelchair. Come on. Just kicked him out of the window. So, now time for Crime Fighters 2, or Vendetta as it was called in the West. You have four characters to choose from. A guy called Sledge, but he resembles more Mr. T. You have Hawk, which is obviously Hulk Hogan. You have Boomer, I believe he's supposed to be Jean-Claude Van Damme. And a black guy, I don't know who that is. Maybe Wesley Snipes, I don't know. So let's try out Boomer. So yeah, Vendetta was Konami's answer to the hugely popular Final Fight in the arcades. And I first came across this game in the early 90s with my brother. We went to this local pizza joint, and they had this game in one of their cabinets, and I just loved it. I mean, it was one of the coolest games I had ever seen. There are several reasons for that. I mean, first of all, I love beat 'em ups. But this game also introduces some new stuff. For instance, you can kick enemies both while you're on the ground or when the enemies are on the ground. For instance, see here, I can just kick them while they're on the ground. You can pick up weapons just as in Final Fight. You can smash them against the wall. So we are at the first boss already. This is Buzzsaw Bravado. So that's the first boss. Yeah, what else can I say about this game? It supports 4 players at once. So you can play 4 players with your friends. I believe Konami used to include 4 players in many of their arcade games, such as Turtles the arcade game. And you have lots of details. I mean, the fact that you can just kick the construction stand there. There are differences between the different regions. There's a reason I have the Japanese version, because the version in the West was actually censored, and you will see how it was censored. We will get there soon. And here you have a lift stage. As I mentioned earlier, you can't have a beat 'em up game without a lift area. So we are at the third boss already. Missing link. Oh man, come on. Let's try out Hulk Hogan. So coming up here is one of the reasons why this game was censored in the West. You see, these leather guys, they were removed from the Western version, and there's a reason for that. They start humping you, and they can also hump the... Sometimes they also hump the lampposts, and the lamps crash down on them. So it's a really annoying attack, this humping, because it's a very difficult attack to avoid. Oh man, it's a really bad situation. You have one leather guy from one side, and you have a leather girl from the other side. This area reminds me of the bar stage in Final Fight, or Streets of Rage 2. So there seems to be a lift area and a bar area in every beat 'em up. Okay, so we are at the next boss. Rude Bros. So these two guys, really annoying, because one of them, the small one, just keeps jumping around, and sometimes he just cling onto your face. There we go. Just gotta kill the scuba guy. And you can throw them away. You can just smash them out of the stage into the water. He just forgot to drop the bomb. Yeah, I see the dogs. They're nasty. Just start humping you. This is probably the nastiest dogs I've seen in any video game ever. Can you imagine dogs humping you in a video game? There's so many cool details. You saw the guy on the bike. He was in the background and then he came to the foreground. Now I need to get that shotgun. I believe it's time for the final boss. Because he will lose energy much quicker. And you need to hold your distance because he's spitting out that acid. Oh yeah. Now he starts shooting with his machine gun, so you need to get close to him. And this machine gun is deadly. Just drains your energy. So there we have Faust, the final boss. So now you save the girl, everyone's happy. Or I don't know what it says in Japanese, but I think they have a surprise up for us. A nasty surprise awaits us. Yeah, so you're not leaving this hell alive. And this is extra stage. It's a boss brawl. So you fight off all the bosses in the game. Oh. I killed them off both, all three of them while I was on the ground. Amazing. So, finally finished. So that's Vendetta, the true ending. And you just enjoy the view of New York, I believe it is. So that's Final Fight and Vendetta. Which is your favorite one? I can't choose between those two games because I personally think they are two of the best beat 'em ups ever. There are things in Vendetta which I prefer and there are things in Final Fight which I think is better. Anyhow, I hope you enjoyed this, and if you would like me to do something similar, a playthrough or something like that, just leave your comments in the comment field, and I'll see you next time. Take care, guys.